and traits. And we're talking about Wolf 44. Okay. Again, we've been working on this question about how else can organisms get its traits other than from its parents. Again, we're practicing in this role of being a wildlife biologist. And last week we read how the sparrow learned its song. And if you didn't do so, I've linked the book on our Canvas page, so make sure to double check that if you need to. And we learned about other ways that organisms can get traits besides from inheritance. And says, what new ideas do you have about how organisms get their traits? So, what new ideas do you have about how organisms get their traits? So we learned a number of things in here, and as we go, we're going to look at a couple of different pages within here. We learned about the story of the spiky crab, okay, the decorator crab. Um, how did the decorator crab get its trait of a spiky shell? If you need to, reread pages 10 and 11 on the screen. If not, if you already know, type it in there. Don't just guess. Again, you can also use the book that I've linked on our Canvas page. So we found out that the decorator crab is not born with a spiky shell. It learned to decorate its shell by choosing things in its environment to help it blend in and hide from predators. They used a number of things like the sea urchin that's on the top there. Some of them also had sea sponges or coral or seaweed, right? They weren't born that way, but the spiky shells are just not inherited. They learned about that in order to survive. Now, how did the bear know how to catch a fish? Reread these if you need to, but how did it figure out how to do that? After doing some reading, we learned that it learned by watching other bears, right? So some of them learn to catch it in its mouth, some of them dive in. They do this as a learning within their environment based on the other bears around and based on what the fishing looks like in their area. And not all of them have different waterfalls nearby, so you wouldn't necessarily have to go through and wait to catch in the mouth like the one on the left side. And it's not an inherited trait. Some organisms get traits from learning, some get traits from food, and some, like trees, get traits from the amount of water available. Okay, that was those redwood trees. All these things, both living and non-living, are part of an organism's environment. So the environment is the area that it lives. So the food that it's able to eat, the things that are around it, okay, and the amount of resources available, like water. Okay. And again, environment is all the living and non-living things in an area. Okay. So, and you could think about that as you look around your environment and where you live. Okay. And even looking inside and outside. So, through our investigating and reading, we've learned an important concept, which is that some traits result from the environment. Okay. So, some of the things that we get from our parents, other things we get from our environment. So you read about the vervet monkey on pages 14 and 15. The vervet monkey wasn't born knowing the different alarm calls, right? Different sound and tones to its alarm calls. The monkey learned the calls from other monkeys in its environment. Okay. Organisms often stay in groups in order to meet their needs. And how did living in a group help the vervet monkey meet its needs? Well, it learned by living in a group that the younger monkeys are able to learn from the older monkeys in the group. So the younger monkeys are then able to imitate or start to copy those older monkeys, and that gets passed down based on the group that they're in. Again, and not all of the calls are the same, depending on where they are, and also for the different animals. What other needs could living in a group help organisms meet? Can you think of other organisms we've investigated that live in groups? Kind of two-part question there. So, what other organisms live in groups, and what else do you get by living in a group? Like, what other needs are met from that? We learned that organisms stay in groups to obtain food and to meet their needs. The number of organisms in a group varies. Again, some might be in small groups, some might be in larger groups or packs. So, as wildlife biologists, again, we're trying to answer this question. Why isn't Wolf 44 more like the Bison Valley pack in hunting style and size? Remember, Bison Valley pack was the parents of Wolf 44, which is why it looks most similar to him, but it has a different hunting style and size, um, which is different than that of the Bison Valley Pack. So again, it lives with that Elk Mountain Pack, but its birth parents are in the Bison Valley Pack. Okay. So we figured out that some traits result from the environment. Okay. We discussed that monkeys get their trait of knowing a particular call, bears get knowing how to fish. Some learn how to survive, like the decorator crab needs to be able to decorate its shell in order to survive. If it doesn't do that, it will be easily identified and won't survive. So when we look back at our pack data, the Elk Mountain Pack hunts in small groups up to 4 wolves. Bison Valley Pack hunts bison in large groups up to 10 wolves, and Wolf 44 hunts elk in small groups up to 4 wolves. Which pack does Wolf 44 hunt like, and how could that be? Do you think learning to hunt is a trait that is inherited or is it determined by the environment? What do you think? Inherited meaning passed down from parents, or learning from the environment, those around you. Okay. It probably learned by watching the other members of the pack, right? So somehow, somewhere along the line, we don't know exactly how Wolf 44 ended up moving from one pack to the other, but being that it is in the Elk Mountain Pack, it is behaving similar to the others in the pack, which is why it's hunting elk. It's hunting in smaller groups. Also, probably why it's larger than the Bison Valley Pack, but because its size is something that is partially determined by the inheritance because it can't grow. It won't necessarily. Its build won't allow it to grow too much more. But it does. It's hunting the same type of thing and in the same way as the Elk Mountain Pack. So the students at Greystone Elementary want to know why Wolf 44 hunts the way it does. What will you tell them? Is the way that Wolf 44 hunts a result of an inherited trait, or is it determined by the environment? And that's what we're going to be tackling tomorrow. So today was a precursor to tomorrow. So sets us up for writing an explanation to them and being able to explain exactly why it is the size and the hunting style are different, and why it is that it's not like it's inherited pack. Okay.